The Atlanta courtroom was a pressure cooker, thick with the scent of polished mahogany and whispered judgments. Captain Lena Caldwell, a 34-year-old Army medic with the 3rd Infantry Division, sat ramrod straight in her dress blues, the silver star pinned to her chest like a shield. Her mother, Beatrice Warwick, sat across the aisle, draped in a tailored Ralph Lauren suit, her diamond choker glinting like a blade. Beside her, Lena's sister, Corinne Warwick, a high-flying corporate lawyer, tapped her Rolex with manicured nails, her face a mask of impatience. To them, Lena was a stain on their pristine Atlanta legacy. A soldier who dared to choose grit over glamour. The gallery buzzed with buckhead elites, their eyes dissecting Lena like she was a ghost from a scandal they'd rather forget. They'd once toasted her at galas. Now they whispered as if she'd stolen the family silver. When the clerk called, Captain Lena Caldwell, her boots hit the marble floor, each step a gunshot in the silence. She took the witness stand, the silver star catching the light like a beacon. Then Beatrice exploded. "You ungrateful wretch!" she shrieked, her voice slicing through the room's decorum. "Take that mockery off your chest. You've shamed the Warwick name." The words landed like shrapnel, and the courtroom froze. Even the bailiff's hand hovered over his holster. Corinne leaned forward, her voice a venomous whisper. "You don't belong here, Lena. That uniform's just a costume." Lena's breath caught, but tears were a luxury she'd learned to ration in Mosul. She locked eyes with Judge Ramsey, his weathered face unreadable, and made a choice. With the precision of disarming an IED, she unpinned her silver star and placed it on the stand's oak table. The soft clink was a war cry, a silent vow that she'd fight their lies with truth. But the ambush was coming. Corinne's lawyer, Preston Tate, strutted forward, his smirk oozing country club arrogance. "Captain Caldwell," he drawled, holding up a grainy photo of Lena adjusting her father's 4 in his final days. "This is unauthorized medical interference, endangering General Amos Warwick's life." The image twisted her care into a crime. Lena cleaning a bedsore, changing a saline bag, now captioned as reckless. Murmurs rippled through the gallery, heads nodding like jurors at a witch trial. Lena's chest, bare of the metal, felt exposed, raw. They weren't just denying her as a daughter, they were dismantling her as a soldier, a woman, a Warwick. Yet Lena sat taller, her hands steady on her thighs, hiding the tremor only she could feel. She'd faced worse than this in the desert. This was just another battlefield. The stakes were higher than the house or the money. Preston hinted at a sealed document, something from General Warwick himself, to be revealed later, a bombshell that could ruin Lena. The judge's gavel fell, pausing the session, leaving the room electric with unanswered questions. Would Lena's service, her sacrifices, be enough to counter her family's betrayal? Or would their polished lies bury her? As she stepped into the hall, a figure in the shadows, a grizzled veteran perhaps, watched her silently, a clue that allies might be closer than she thought. If this story's grabbing you, hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, share it with someone who gets it, and subscribe to follow Lena's fight. You won't want to miss what's coming. The air outside was heavy with Georgia humidity, but Lena didn't feel it. She walked to her rental car, the echo of her mother's scream still ringing in her ears. She'd always been the outsider, too rough for Beatrice's buckhead brunches, too defiant for Corinne's curated life. Growing up, Lena had been the girl fixing dirt bikes in the driveway while Corinne played Chopin at the country club. Beatrice once told a friend, sipping sweet tea, "Corinne's a lily, delicate and poised. Lena's just weeds." Lena overheard it, hiding behind the kitchen door, a plate of biscuits trembling in her hands. That memory burned now, fueling her resolve. At 19, when Lena announced her enlistment, General Amos Warwick, her father, a legend with a chest full of medals, slapped her across the face. "You're no daughter of mine if you choose mud over legacy," he'd growled. Beatrice adjusted a vase of peonies, unmoved. Corinne smirked from the staircase. That night, Lena packed a duffel and left, vowing to earn her own honor. She'd survived ranger school, carried wounded soldiers through gunfire, and patched lives under mortar fire. But her family's rejection was a wound no tourniquet could close. As she drove back to her temporary apartment, the dashboard clock ticked like a countdown. The trial wasn't over. Preston's smug hint at a hidden document gnawed at her. Was it a lie, or did her father leave one final betrayal? Lena gripped the wheel, her silver star now tucked in her pocket, its weight a reminder of what she'd earned, and what she still had to fight for. Somewhere, in the shadows of Atlanta's legal maze, The truth was waiting. And Lena Caldwell, docked to her brothers-in-arms, wasn't done fighting. The sterile hum of machines filled the Warwick family estate, a sprawling Buckhead mansion where every polished surface screamed old money. Captain Lena Caldwell, still in her dust-stained fatigues from a red-eye flight from Yemen, moved with quiet precision through her father's bedroom. General Amos Warwick, once a towering figure who commanded respect across Pentagon halls, now lay frail, tethered to tubes and monitors. His stroke had stolen his voice, but not his presence. Lena, the daughter he'd once disowned for choosing the army over law school, was now his caregiver. No nurses, no aides. Just her. She adjusted his foredrip, checked his vitals, and sponged sweat from his brow with the same steady hands that had saved soldiers under fire. The room smelled of antiseptic and faded cigar smoke, a ghost of the man who'd slapped her for daring to enlist. As she secured his oxygen mask, Amos's eyes flickered open. His hand, trembling but deliberate, found hers. A single, slow squeeze. Weak, yet heavy with meaning. Lena froze, her breath catching. Was it an apology? A fleeting acknowledgement? She'd spent years chasing his approval, only to meet his silence. At 19, she'd stood in his study, announcing her enlistment, and his slap had turned her cheek toward a portrait of him in dress blues. "Don't call me father if you choose that life," he'd said. Now that same hand held hers, and for a moment, the years of rejection dissolved into something unspoken, something real. She didn't cry. Combat had taught her to hoard tears, but her chest tightened with a hope she hadn't felt since she was a girl. The moment shattered when Beatrice glided in, her silk shawl trailing like a queen's train. "Lena, you're making the house reek of a field hospital," she said. Her voice honeyed venom as she spoke into her phone. "Yes, Evelyn, she's playing nurse again. It's dreadful." She didn't look at Lena, just waved a hand like swatting a fly. Corinne wasn't there. She was handling things from her Atlanta penthouse, too busy for a dying father. Lena ignored the jab, focusing on Amos's pulse, steady but fading. She'd learned in the desert that you don't answer insults with words. You answer with action. But the sting lingered, a reminder of every Thanksgiving she'd spent alone, every gala she was barred from, every time her mother called her unrefined behind closed doors. Days later, Amos passed. Lena was at his side, holding that same hand. His final breath came with another squeeze, stronger this time, as if he knew she'd stayed when no one else did. The monitors flatlined, and the silence was louder than any battlefield. Lena sat there, alone, until dawn broke through the mansion's stained glass windows. She didn't call Beatrice or Corinne. They'd find out soon enough. Instead, she folded his blanket with the precision of a flag at a military funeral, her hands steady but her heart fracturing. The courtroom loomed in her memory as she stood in that room, now empty of life but heavy with secrets. Weeks later, during the trial, a bombshell landed. General Thane Holt, a legend whose name was whispered in army circles, strode into the courtroom with a sealed Pentagon packet. He held it aloft, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "This is General Amos Warwick's commendation for Captain Lena Caldwell's Silver Star, written 7 years ago." The packet detailed her heroism in Yemen, a nomination Amos had delayed to shield her from political fallout. Beatrice's face drained of color. Corinne's pen froze mid-scribble. The letter, in Amos's unmistakable scrawl, read, "She earned this not as my daughter, but as the soldier I never deserved." The gallery gasped, and Lena's throat closed. Her father had seen her, not the weed her mother scorned, but the soldier who carried his legacy in blood and grit. That revelation wasn't just vindication. It was a lifeline. It tied Lena's quiet caregiving to the courtroom war still raging. Preston Tate, Corinne's slick attorney, had hinted at a document to destroy her, but this packet was a counterstrike. Had Amos left other secrets? Was there more he'd hidden to protect her? As Lena left the mansion that night, the weight of his final squeeze lingered. She drove past Atlanta's glittering skyline, the city's pulse mocking her own uncertainty. The trial wasn't over, and Preston's promised evidence hung like a storm cloud. Lena clutched her silver star in her pocket, its edges sharp against her palm. She'd cared for her father when no one else would, and now she'd fight for the truth he'd left behind. Somewhere in the shadows of the city, an ally, or an enemy, was watching, waiting for the next move. The Yemeni desert was a furnace, the air thick with dust that clung to Captain Lena Caldwell's fatigues like a second skin. At 34, she was a combat medic with the 3rd Infantry Division, Her call sign Doc, earned through blood and trust. Her unit's convoy rumbled through a narrow valley near Marib, the horizon shimmering with heat. The mission was routine: secure an outpost, rotate supplies. But routine in war is a lie. When an RPG screamed from a rocky outcrop, the lead Humvee erupted in flames, and chaos swallowed the world. Shouts, gunfire, the screech of metal. Specialist Ethan Dorsey, 20, with a grin that lit up the mess hall, was sprawled in the dirt, blood pooling from a chest wound. The unit froze, pinned by sniper fire, but Lena didn't. She sprinted through a hail of bullets, her heart pounding louder than the cracks around her, and dragged Ethan behind a smoldering vehicle. Her hands moved like they were born for this. She tore open his vest, her fingers finding the entry wound, a sucking chest injury, his lung collapsing. "Stay with me, Ethan," she said, her voice steady as she ripped open her med kit. The needle decompression kit glinted in the harsh sun. She drove it into his chest, the hiss of air escaping like a prayer answered. Ethan's eyes, wide with panic, refocused, his shallow breath stabilizing. Lena didn't look up, didn't flinch as bullets pinged off the wreckage. She applied a seal, taped it tight, and radioed for medevac, her voice cutting through the static. "This is document. We need a bird now." The chopper's thump came minutes later, and Ethan was loaded, alive because of her. As the dust settled, Sergeant Roy Tatum, a grizzled veteran who'd barely spoken to her in weeks, clapped her shoulder. "Doc," he grunted, the single word heavier than any medal. The unit's eyes shifted. Lena wasn't just the general's daughter anymore. She was one of them. That moment in the desert wasn't just survival. It was rebirth. Back home, her family, Beatrice with her diamond chokers, Corinne with her corporate smirk, called her a failure, a weed in their manicured world. Out here, under fire, Lena was Doc, the one they trusted when death came knocking. But the cost was steep. She missed her cousin's wedding, her best friend's baby shower, a love that faded under the weight of cancelled leaves. Yemen didn't care about her sacrifices, and neither did Atlanta's elite. The memory of that desert rescue burned bright as Lena sat in her rental car outside the Atlanta courtroom, weeks after her father's death. The trial was a different kind of war, one where her family's lies twisted her care into a crime. Preston Tate, Corinne's lawyer, had flashed a photo in court. Lena adjusting her father's now labeled as unauthorized. The accusation stung worse than shrapnel, but Yemen had taught her to keep moving under fire. She'd saved Ethan, carried him through hell, and earned her unit's respect. Could she do the same here, against a family that wanted her erased? The sealed Pentagon packet General Thane Holt revealed, her father's commendation, hinted at a truth she hadn't fully grasped. Amos had seen her heroism, even if he never said it. But Preston's promised evidence loomed, a shadow of doubt. Was it a forgery, a final betrayal from her father's grave? As Lena gripped her silver star, its edges biting into her palm, she remembered Ethan's shaky grin as the medevac lifted off. That grin was why she fought. Not for applause, but for lives. The courtroom was no different. She'd faced Preston's ambush, just as she'd faced the snipers in Marib. But a new threat simmered, a whispered rumor among the courthouse staff about a second document, one that could unravel everything. Lena's jaw tightened. She'd survived the desert. She'd survive this. Somewhere in Atlanta's legal maze, an ally, perhaps the shadowy veteran she'd glimpsed, held a piece of the puzzle. The trial's next session was hours away, and Lena knew the real fight was just beginning. Her hands, steady in Yemen, would need to be steadier now. The Atlanta courtroom hummed with tension, its polished oak walls closing in like a bunker under siege. Captain Lena Caldwell sat on the witness stand, her fatigues a stark contrast to the sea of tailored suits. Her silver star, unpinned in her earlier act of defiance, rested in her pocket, its weight a quiet anchor. Her mother, Beatrice Warwick, sat rigid, her diamond choker catching the light like a warning. Corinne, her sister, scribbled notes, her Rolex glinting with every calculated flick. The gallery, Buckhead's elite, friends of the Warwick name, whispered, their judgment a low buzz. Preston Tate, Corinne's attorney, had just landed a blow, showing grainy footage of Lena arguing with her dying father, General Amos Warwick. "You never cared," her voice echoed in the clip, cut to paint her as unhinged. The room leaned forward, hungry for her downfall. Then the doors swung open, and the air shifted. General Thane Holt, a legend whose name carried the weight of battlefields from Kandahar to Somalia, strode in. His dress blues were a field of ribbons, his gait slow but unyielding, like a storm rolling over the horizon. Every head turned. Preston's smirk faltered. "Your Honor," Holt's voice rumbled, deep as distant artillery. "I request to testify." Judge Ramsey, his glasses perched low, raised a hand to silence Preston's objection. "Let him speak." Holt took the stand, his eyes locking on the judge, ignoring the Warwick's icy stares. "I've served 40 years, he began. "I've seen soldiers break and soldiers rise. Captain Lena Caldwell is the latter." The room held its breath as he recounted a 2017 ambush in Yemen. "Our convoy was hit near Marib. RPG took out our lead vehicle. I was bleeding out, femoral artery torn. Lena dragged me 50 meters under fire, patched me with her own belt. She saved my life and 2 others, then led the evac. She didn't flinch." The gallery stirred, murmurs rising like a tide. Preston stood, flustered. "General, this is about inheritance, not war stories." Holt turned, his gaze steel. "This is about character, counselor. You tried to assassinate hers with a doctored video." Then he dropped the bombshell. From a leather portfolio, he produced a sealed Pentagon packet. "This," he said, holding it high, "is General Amos Warwick's nomination for Captain Caldwell's Silver Star, written 7 years ago." Gasps rippled through the room. Beatrice's face paled. Corinne's pen snapped in her hand. Holt read Amos's words. "She earned this not as my daughter, but as a soldier I never deserved." The letter, in Amos's bold scrawl, was a grenade, shattering the narrative of Lena as a failure. He'd delayed the nomination to protect her from political fallout, a silent act of pride. Holt saluted Lena, formal and unwavering. She stood, returning it, her hands steady despite the storm in her chest. The judge's eyes softened, but Preston wasn't done. "We have more evidence," he snapped, hinting at a document still to come, a shadow that kept Lena on edge. Holt's testimony had turned the tide, but the war wasn't won. As he stepped down, he leaned close to Lena, his voice low. "Hold your ground, document. You've got allies." Her pulse quickened. Was he hinting at more help? A figure in the back, a woman in a nurse's jacket, watched intently, her face familiar but unplaceable. Lena's mind raced. Was this the ally Holt meant, or another trap? The gavel fell, pausing the session, but the room buzzed with electricity. Lena stepped into the hall, Holt's packet a lifeline in her mind. Her father had seen her, even if he'd never said it. But Preston's promised evidence loomed like a sniper in the shadows. Lena's desert instincts kicked in. She'd survived ambushes before. As she passed the courthouse windows, Atlanta's skyline gleamed, indifferent to her fight. The nurse lingered nearby, slipping a folded note into her bag. Lena didn't read it yet, but its weight felt like a new weapon. The trial's next move was coming, and Lena, forged in fire, was ready to face it. The air in the lawyer's office on Peachtree Street was thick with the scent of cedar and privilege, a stark contrast to the desert dust Captain Lena Caldwell still carried in her memory. She sat across a mahogany table, her fatigues a quiet rebellion against the polished world of her family. Beatrice Warwick, her mother, perched opposite, her Ralph Lauren suit pristine, her diamond choker gleaming like a noose of judgment. Corinne, Lena's sister, sat to her left, her white silk blouse as sharp as her corporate ambition, her eyes flicking to her Rolex as if Lena's existence was a scheduling inconvenience. The Buckhead elite, their family's allies, had already left, but their whispers lingered like smoke. Preston Tate, the Warwick's attorney, stood at the head of the table, his gray suit as cold as his tone. He was reading General Amos Warwick's will, and every word felt like a trap closing around Lena. Tate's voice dipped, deliberate and sharp, as he reached the estate division. To Corinne Warwick, the primary residence and all attached assets. To Beatrice Warwick, a living trust with residual equity and family holdings. He paused, his eyes locking on Lena like a predator sizing up prey. And to Lena Caldwell, he said, his lips curling, a conditional trust of modest value, contingent upon her completion of psychological rehabilitation for PTSD, as assessed by a licensed practitioner. The room froze. Beatrice coughed, a sound laced with disdain. Corinne let out a soft, venomous chuckle, her pen scratching a note. Lena's lungs tightened, her breath a shallow pulse. They weren't just denying her the house or money, they were branding her broken, a liability too damaged to claim even a scrap of the Warwick legacy. The insult wasn't new. Her mother had called her unrefined at garden parties, and Corinne had once smirked, "You're just playing soldier." But this was surgical, a public erasure. Lena stood, her boots echoing on the marble floor, and walked out without a word. The corridor's portraits of stern-faced judges seemed to watch her, their silence heavier than the one she carried. Outside, Atlanta's summer heat hit like a wall, but she barely felt it. Her silver star, tucked in her pocket, burned against her thigh. She was halfway to her rental car when Corinne's heels clicked behind her. "Lena, stop," she called, her voice a command wrapped in sugar. Lena turned, her jaw tight. Corinne adjusted her sunglasses, her smile cruel. "Take the offer, okay? Be grateful. You're just a broken soldier who doesn't belong in our world." Her words were a blade, twisting the knife of every rejection, every empty Thanksgiving chair, every gala she was barred from. Lena's voice was low, steady. "You know what scares you, Corinne? Dad saw me. He saw me as a soldier, not you as his legacy." Corinne's face twitched, a crack in her polished mask. "You're a failure who ran to the army because you couldn't hack it here," she hissed. Lena didn't flinch. She turned and walked away, leaving Corinne in the parking lot, her words swallowed by the city's hum. The drive to her apartment was a blur, Atlanta's skyline glittering like a taunt. Lena's hands gripped the wheel, her knuckles white. The will's condition wasn't just about money. It was a declaration that she was defective, unfit. But Yemen flashed in her mind. Dragging Ethan Dorsey through gunfire, saving General Holt's life, earning dock from men who trusted her with their lives. Her family's betrayal was a familiar wound, but this one cut deeper, threatening to unravel everything she'd built. General Holt's courtroom testimony, revealing her father's hidden Silver Star nomination, had given her a lifeline. Amos had seen her worth, even if he'd hidden it. But Preston's hinted evidence still loomed, a document that could twist her father's intent. Was it real or another lie? As Lena parked, she spotted the nurse from the courthouse, lingering across the street, her eyes darting nervously. The folded note she'd slipped into Lena's bag felt heavier now, a potential key, or a trap. The trial's next session was tomorrow, and Lena sensed the fight was far from over. She'd survived ambushes in the desert. She'd survived this one, too. But the shadow of that document, and the nurse's watchful gaze, kept her on edge, her instincts screaming that the real battle was just beginning. The Atlanta dusk painted the sky in bruises of purple and gold, casting long shadows over the backyard of the Warwick family estate, now legally Captain Lena Caldwell's. She stood in the overgrown garden, her boots sinking into the Georgia clay, a shovel in her calloused hands. The house behind her, with its faded white shutters and creaking porch, felt less like a home and more like a battlefield scarred by years of silence and rejection. Lena's mother, Beatrice, had once called this yard a showpiece for Buckhead's finest, but the roses were long dead, choked by weeds. The old dogwood tree, a centerpiece of her childhood where she'd once climbed to escape her mother's critiques, had been uprooted by a storm years ago. Its absence was a wound, a reminder of everything her family had tried to erase, including her. But Lena wasn't here to mourn. She was here to rebuild. She drove the shovel into the earth, her movements deliberate, like setting up a triage station under fire. In her hands was a dogwood sapling, its roots wrapped in burlap, its slender branches tipped with the promise of white blooms. This wasn't a tribute to the past, it was a defiance, a marker of her own story. As she packed the soil around its base, the act felt like stitching a wound. Hers, not the family's. The house was hers now, one in the courtroom after General Thane Holt's testimony had shattered her family's lies. Her father's hidden Silver Star nomination, revealed in that packed Atlanta courtroom, had proven he'd seen her worth, even if he'd never spoken it. But the victory was hollow. Beatrice's final text, "You've destroyed our legacy," burned in Lena's mind, and Corinne's smug promise of a gala invite, as if Lena could be bought back into their world, was a fresh cut. As she watered the sapling, a rustle at the fence made her pause. A silhouette, too familiar, slipped into the shadows. Was it the nurse from the courthouse, the one who'd left that cryptic note Lena still hadn't read? Or someone sent by Corinne, plotting to claw back the estate? The trial was over, but Preston Tate's hinted evidence, a document he'd never produced, hung like a ghost. Lena's instincts, honed in Yemen's ambushes, screamed caution. She patted the note in her pocket, its edges worn from her touch. Whatever it held, truth or trap, could shift the fragile peace she'd won. The dogwood stood firm, its first bud catching the fading light, a quiet vow that Lena would root herself here, no matter what came next. The memory of Yemen flooded back. She'd dragged specialist Ethan Dorsey through gunfire, her hands steady as she saved his life. That same steadiness had carried her through her father's final days, spoon-feeding him broth when no one else showed up. Now, it anchored her as she claimed this house, this yard, this life. But the fight wasn't over. Corinne's legal team was rumored to be filing an appeal, whispering to Atlanta's elite that Lena had stolen the estate. The note from the nurse, unopened, was a ticking bomb. Lena's gaze flicked to the fence again. No movement, but the air felt charged, like the moment before an RPG strike. She wiped her brow, the sapling's shadow stretching across the clay. This wasn't just a tree. It was a line in the sand. She'd survived her family's betrayal, but their next move was coming, and Lena knew it. As night fell, she sat on the porch, the house creaking behind her like it was whispering secrets. The dogwood stood sentinel in the yard, a symbol of what she'd fought for. Not just a deed, but a life earned through grit. The note in her pocket felt heavier now, its contents a mystery that could unravel everything. Had her father left another secret? Was the nurse an ally, or part of Corinne's game? Lena's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Check the note. You're not alone. Her pulse quickened. She didn't open it yet, but the words echoed General Holt's promise in the courtroom. You've got allies. The sapling swayed in the breeze, its bud glowing under the moon. Lena's war wasn't over, but this tree, this house, this moment, they were hers. And she'd fight to keep them. The small office of the Atlanta Veteran Support Network smelled of burnt coffee and resilience, its worn chairs arranged in a circle that held more than just bodies. It held stories. Captain Lena Caldwell, now just Lena in this safe haven, sat among women who wore their scars like badges. There was Marla, a Marine who'd lost a leg to an IED in Kandahar, her laugh louder than her limp. Rosa, a Navy vet whose night terrors kept her from sleep, and others, each carrying a weight the world rarely saw. The room was a sanctuary, far from the polished cruelty of Buckhead's elite or the courtroom where Lena's family had tried to erase her. Here, in the flicker of fluorescent lights, Lena found what the Warwick mansion never offered. A family forged in survival, not blood. She'd been coming to these Tuesday sessions for weeks, mostly listening, her arms crossed, her silver star tucked away in her pocket. The women didn't pry. They understood the power of silence. But on her fourth visit, Lena spoke. Not about the trial, where General Thane Holt's testimony and her father's hidden Silver Star nomination had won her the Warwick estate. Not about her mother Beatrice's venom or Corinne's betrayal. She spoke of the quiet grief after her father's death, of sitting alone in his study, surrounded by his medals, wondering if she'd ever been enough. The women nodded, their eyes holding no pity, only recognition. Marla passed her a stale oatmeal cookie, saying, "You're still standing, Lena. That's the win." Rosa squeezed her hand, her grip steady despite her own battles. In that circle, Lena wasn't Captain Caldwell or the Warwick outcast. She was one of them, seen and whole. But the peace was fragile. Whispers had reached the center. Rumors that Corinne's legal team was digging for dirt, planning to appeal the court's ruling. A local reporter, cozy with Buckhead's elite, had been sniffing around, asking about Lena's stability. The note from the courthouse nurse, still unopened in Lena's pocket, felt like a grenade with a loose pin. Was it proof of her family's schemes, or a setup to discredit her further? The women at the center sensed the storm. Marla, leaning on her cane, muttered, "They don't quit, do they? Neither do we." Her words were a spark, reigniting Lena's fight. These women with their own wars, VA battles, PTSD, lost comrades, were her unit now, and she'd protect them as fiercely as she had Ethan Dorsey in Yemen. The memory of that desert rescue flashed vivid. Lena had dragged Ethan through gunfire, her hands steady as she saved his collapsing lung. That same grit had carried her through her father's final days, when she'd cared for him alone, despite Beatrice's scorn. Now, it fueled her in this new fight. At the session's end, the women lingered, sharing bad coffee and worse jokes. Rosa mentioned a lawyer friend, a bulldog who hates liars, offering to connect Lena. It was a small gesture, but it felt like cover fire in a firefight. As Lena left, Marla called after her, "Check that note, girl. Might be your next weapon." Lena nodded, her fingers brushing the paper in her pocket. The nurse's cryptic text, "You're not alone," echoed in her mind, tying her to General Holt's courtroom promise of allies. Outside, Atlanta's skyline glittered, indifferent to the war Lena still faced. The dogwood sapling she'd planted in her yard came to mind. Its first bud a quiet defiance against her family's legacy. But the rumors of Curran's appeal were growing louder, and the reporter's questions hinted at a new smear. Something about unstable behavior from Lena's deployments. The note in her pocket was a risk, but also a chance. Was the nurse an ally, or part of Curran's game? Lena's instincts, honed under mortar fire, told her to move carefully. She'd survived ambushes before, but this one felt personal, a test of the sisterhood she'd found. As she drove past the center, a figure watched from a parked car. A woman, maybe the nurse, her face obscured. Lena's pulse quickened. The fight for her house, her truth, was far from over. But with these women behind her, she wasn't fighting alone. The forward operating base in Yemen was a patchwork of tents and concrete, the air thick with diesel and tension. Captain Lena Caldwell sat under a flickering bulb, reviewing medevac logs, her fatigue still dusted from a 14-hour recon. It was past midnight, the base quiet except for the hum of generators and distant coyote howls. Her silver star, earned saving specialist Ethan Dorsey, was tucked away. She didn't wear it here, where trust mattered more than medals. General Thane Holt's boots crunched on the gravel as he entered. No fanfare, just presence. He sat across from her, pushing aside a stack of files, his weathered face softened by the dim light. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked, his voice low, like a father checking on a daughter. "Miss what, sir?" Lena replied, her pen pausing. The illusion that everything back home makes sense. She didn't answer right away, her mind flashing to Atlanta. Beatrice's diamond choker, Curran's smug Rolex, the family that called her a weed. Holt nodded, reading her silence. He reached into his pocket and slid a worn silver coin across the table, its edges dulled by time. "From my first command," he said. "You don't earn this for valor. You earn it for grit." Lena's fingers closed around it, the metal warm from his hand. It wasn't heavy, but it carried the weight of everything she'd fought for. Every life saved, every night spent proving her worth. Holt didn't linger on sentiment. "You're not just a medic, Caldwell. You're the one we trust when it all goes to hell." His words landed like a lifeline, tying her to the desert, to the unit that called her Doc, to a family that didn't need pearls or pedigrees. She thought of Ethan's shaky grin after she'd saved him, of Sergeant Tatum's gruff "Doc" in the aftermath. This coin was more than metal. It was proof she belonged. But the moment wasn't just solace. It was a warning. Holt's eyes flicked to the tent flap, where shadows moved beyond the canvas. "You've got enemies back home," he said, his voice dropping. "They're not done with you." Lena's mind snapped to the Atlanta courtroom, where her family's lies had painted her as unstable. General Holt's testimony, revealing her father's hidden Silver Star nomination, had won her the Warwick estate, but Curran's legal team was circling, rumored to be digging for new dirt. The note from the courthouse nurse, still unopened in Lena's pocket, felt heavier now, its cryptic message, "You're not alone," echoing Holt's words. Was it a clue to her family's next move, or a lifeline from an unexpected ally? The coin in her hand was a reminder. She'd survived ambushes before, but this fight was personal. Lena's thoughts drifted to the dogwood sapling she'd planted in her new yard. Its first bud a defiance against her family's legacy. The Atlanta Veterans Support Network, where Marla and Rosa shared her scars, had given her a new unit. But the rumors of Curran's appeal, the reporter sniffing around, and the nurse's note kept her on edge. Holt stood, his shadow long against the tent wall. "Keep that coin close, document. You'll need it for what's coming." He left without another word, his boots fading into the night. Lena sat alone, the coin's weight grounding her. She'd faced death in Yemen, carried her father through his final days, and stood tall against her family's betrayal. But the shadow of that unopened note, and the figure she'd glimpsed watching her, hinted at a new threat. Was it the nurse, or someone Curran had sent? The coin gleamed under the bulb, a promise she wasn't alone, but the next battle was hers to fight. As she tucked the coin away, her phone buzzed, a blocked number. The screen flashed. "Open the note. Time's running out." Lena's pulse spiked. The desert had taught her to trust her instincts, and they screamed now. The trial's victory was only the beginning. Curran's next move, whatever it was closing in, and Lena, coin in hand, was ready to meet it head-on. The Atlanta dawn broke soft over the Warwick estate. Now Lena's, its white shutters catching the first light like a quiet surrender. She stood on the porch, a mug of black coffee warming her hands, the dogwood sapling in the yard blooming defiantly against the Georgia clay. The house wasn't just a deed, it was her story, carved from years of silence, grit, and hard-won truth. The coin from General Holt rested in her pocket, a talisman of the family she'd found in the desert and the Veterans Center, not the one that tried to erase her. Lena didn't need Beatrice's approval or Corinne's acceptance. She'd built her own legacy, one life saved at a time, one root planted in defiance. The note from the nurse, finally opened, had revealed a truth that sealed her victory, a confession of Corinne's attempt to bribe witnesses, now in the hands of Lena's lawyer. The war was over, and Lena had won, not just the house, but her peace. The magnolia's bloom swayed in the breeze, a reminder that some things endure. Lena wasn't running anymore. She was home, not in her family's shadow, but in a space she'd claimed. Her story wasn't a fairy tale, but it was hers, and that was enough. If Lena's journey hit you, drop a like, share a memory in the comments, or just say, I'm here. Your story matters too. Subscribe to keep walking with us through these quiet wars. We're stronger together.